Welcome to Worlds Within, where story becomes space. We're your hosts, Alyssa and Ash, and every episode we explore fictional worlds that don't just live on the page. They pull you in, build themselves around you, and let you wander through them. This is a podcast for readers who don't just love books, they live in them. We dive deep into sensory storytelling, character perspectives, and the world-building mechanics that turn fiction into a fully immersive experience. Last episode, Alyssa brought us an eerie but cozy read with Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This episode, it's my turn again, and I have us journeying to the Sarah J. Maas verse with A Court of Thorns and Roses.
We start each episode with a plot teaser. We make a cup of tea to match the book and read through the synopsis. Fair warning, though, we do discuss spoilers throughout the book or throughout the show. Our tea today is a little bit of spice with a little bit of floral. This is a rose and cinnamon spiced tea with a little bit of added, I've got ginger, clove, because there is some spice in this book. So while we are letting our tea steep and Ash is starting to enjoy, let's get into the synopsis. When 19-year-old huntress Feyre kills a wolf in the woods, a terrifying creature arrives to demand retribution. Dragged to a treacherous magical land she knows only from legends, Feyre discovers that her captor is not truly a beast, but one of the lethal, immortal fairies who once ruled her world. At least he's not a beast all the time. As she adapts to her new home, her feelings for the fairy, Tamlin, transform from icy hostility into a fiery passion that burns through every lie she's been told about the beautiful, dangerous world of the Fae. But something is not right in the fairy lands. An ancient, wicked shadow is growing, and Feyre must find a way to stop it or doom Tamlin and his world forever.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ash, tell me about your relationship with this book.
Well, ACOTAR was on my TBR for a very long time, but I didn't actually dive at all into the Sarah J. Maas verse until 2022. Another dear friend of mine really pushed me into it. However, she was very rude about her baptism or my baptism into the Sarah J. Maas verse because she started me with the first Crescent City book.
Very different.
Very different. Also, it was the only book out at that time in the Crescent City series. So I read it and I was like, well, now what the heck am I supposed to do? Because there's nothing. She's like, well, now you start with Throne of Glass and ACOTAR. And I was like,
so from one end of the spectrum to the exact opposite.
Right. Because on a scale, like on a chili pepper scale, you have like Throne of Glass, which is like maybe not bell pepper. I would say bell pepper adjacent, right? So it's very, very mild. And then you've got ACOTAR, which is, again, a little bit more spicy, but like still commercial, right? And then you have Crescent City, which is a habanero. But again, starting me with a book that's a series that has nothing else out. Obviously, now she has 2 more in that series, but what a rough start to the Sarah J. Maas verse. And I didn't actually go back to read ACOTAR until 2024. Now then I breezed through the first 6 books in like a week while I was on vacation, but and have subsequently read it several more times. But it was nice to come back to ACOTAR in this way. So what about you?
As you've said, it's been incredibly difficult to avoid the hype and popularity of this book, but I have some old hipster in me that is like, I can't possibly read it. It's too popular. So I was resistant to reading this book. There was just something in me that said, I just don't know that this is for me. And so when I started reading Romantasy, I steered clear of ACOTAR entirely. I don't know. There was just part of me that kept thinking, if it's this popular, it can't be that good, which is unfortunate thinking and kind of limited thinking. But I was just too cool to read the mainstream. But I had successfully avoided the Sarah J. Maas verse until now. So this is my first reading of anything by her. And I've got some true first impressions for us.
Well, why don't we talk about those?
Sure. So as we mentioned at the top, if you want to avoid spoilers, now's the time to do it. So let's take a brief pause. And if you want to keep scrolling or pause this podcast and go read, by all means. Or you're probably not like me and you've read all of these 100 times. And so you probably know more than I do at this point. But we're going to pause. All right. Consider yourself warned. Okay. So my true first impressions. At the top of the book, I felt like Feyre, as she's introduced to us, is Katniss meets Cinderella. And now I understand that ACOTAR is supposedly a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but when I'm reading Feyre from the jump, she is Katniss with a bow and arrow hunting in the woods. And I love Katniss through and through. She's starving, she's poor, and she has two sisters who don't really get her and aren't really like grateful for her and the work that she does. Very Cinderella. They're not evil. They're just misguided and not used to the loss of the richness that they had previously. But I even pictured the cottage that Feyre's family lived in like Katniss's home in District 12. And I found some grounded comfort in that, right? But simultaneously, I was kind of annoyed. Because I was like, oh, cool. So this is so popular because it's derivative of other characters. But I think, again, that was just the lens through which I was coming to the book. And the opening scenes in the winter woods and being so hungry and so cold and so desperate felt really true to me. And I've become a little bit of a winter girl in the last year or so. So I was like, yes, give me snow-covered branches, give me cold, give me quiet snow walks. Don't give me a wolf 10 times its normal size. Would like to avoid that, though. But that was my general first impression, is this character feels familiar, slightly derivative, but I liked the setting in which we get to know her.
So it's interesting that you pictured the cottage like Katniss's house in the seam. I went more like leaned into like fairy tale, and I was seeing like Seven Dwarfs cottage, like a cottage. Yeah. And so it's interesting, again, leaning into the more Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast type vibe. I do absolutely agree on the opening bit, like the intensity of the cold and the hunger and the desperation. But yes, of course he's a fairy. Yeah. Like she says it and you're like, duh, why would you even question it? And it's like,
Feyre's not bright, y'all.
Right. So it's like a horror film. You know, you watch the characters make really dumb mistakes and you're screaming at them saying, like, why? Like, obviously there's a slasher behind the curtain. Like, why would you do that? So you can't do anything there. I will say that I love the way that Mass takes some of the like standard fairy tropes and mechanics that we expect to be true, and then like picks and chooses what she leans into versus what she subverts our expectations on. And you know, to your point of Katniss meets Cinderella, like again, there's comfort in that because it's very similar to Nettle in that like there's comforting similarities that make it familiar and like really draw you in because you're like, I've been here before. Mm-hmm. I know this tree, but like it's also there's a newness to it as well. Mm-hmm. So let's get into some of the world mechanics that she uses, because I know you have very strong feelings on them.
Yeah, and I think I've said this to you several times at this point, but ACOTAR truly feels like a 400-page prologue for the rest of the series. It is very heavy on the world building, but it is very much carved out. This is book one, right? It does set us up for a more complex or longer version of these stories, but there's so much space in this book devoted to the history, the politics, the overly descriptive expositions about Prythian, the spring court, and 7 pages on Moonlight on Roses. And that sometimes I felt like, while important, the pacing suffered in this book quite a bit. The bulk of this book is world building with some character development that felt, to me, somewhat shallow and wish it would have gone further. However, I will say one of the scenes that I felt this tension of pacing the most between world building and wanting to kind of like move along is when Feyre was in the library and she's looking at the painting of the Fey history, and it is described across like 3 pages. And I'm like, cool, got it, great. Can we keep going? Can we keep going? It is really rich in information though, and I know that information becomes important throughout the remainder of the series and the remainder of the book. But I felt myself wanting to like skip ahead to get to some action.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, that's true of most of her books, is like she is so intentional about like setting all of these things up. And she gives you these little tidbits that do come back later, but like it is a slog to get through from the get. And you kind of have to be invested to be like, okay, I know that this is what I'm paying in to get a better payout later in the series. I think you mentioned that like we start to see more action when she comes back to Prythian. The context in which we're getting some of that lore is more natural as opposed to just extensive exposition. Because again, to your point, there are like blocks of pages where nobody says anything.
Yeah.
Nobody does anything.
Yeah.
It is just those descriptions. But I think it is important. Again, it is important in the grand scheme of things, but it's very much a like forest for the trees situation. So
when Feyre comes back, right, she can sent back to the human world because Tamlin wants to keep her safe. Insert eye roll here. But she comes back and she sees the spring court of the manor just completely destroyed. And she finds Alice, and Alice is like, oh, girl, like I can finally tell you what's really been going on here.
All except this one piece.
Right. But I can't tell you that. But it is that moment where the pacing picks up for me and feels like, to your point, much more natural that we're getting this curse. We're getting more lore, more history, more like understanding of this world with stakes. Because there weren't stakes before. We're like, oh, okay, so like there's humans and then there's Fae and there was a war and now there's a treaty and there's a wall and okay, cool, like you hate each other, got it. But oh my God, isn't the spring court just like the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen in your whole entire life? But let's talk a little bit about the world itself. So we understand that there are 7 courts, right? 4 for the seasons and 3 for solar courts. And we get that there are high fae and then there are fairies. But other than the high fae looking human, what is the difference? It's not really explored or explained. And then how many fairies live in the courts? Are there cities? Are there towns? Are there villages? Or is it just the manor? Like we don't get a fully fleshed out world despite spending so much time and page real estate in the world building. And then the curse, which is so complex, but also so silly, just ridiculous. And I know that is one of the Fae tropes, right? Of like, they're immortal, they're living forever, so they just get bored and they're like, yeah, let's do something that's really off the wall and really out of pocket. I don't know. It just seemed really ridiculous because Amarantha was like, I'm going to put a 7x7 curse on you because you don't want me. How dare you? I can't.
Well, and I think, I mean, again, we have talked about like, you say the silliness, like the silliness of like the magic, like what is the context? And we get this later, but like, what is the context of like, how were you able to trap their magic?
Yeah.
Like, or
trick you,
like, or, you know, there's like these bargains, like how do they work, you know? And so, like it's, what's the show? Whose line is it anyway? The rules are made up and the rules are made up and the points don't matter.
That's Prythian. That's Prythian entirely, right? Like the magic pack makes no sense. no sense at all. And it doesn't need to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is truly a commercial, like, popcorn book. Like, you want to turn your brain off. You don't really want to think about it too much. However, that's not this podcast. And so the magic is nonsensical. It comes from the earth, but also, like, we've got to have this Kalanmai ritual to, like, make more magic, but also you're going to be possessed by a lot of magic, but also, like, the magic really doesn't have any limits or rules, and it just looks different based on what you can do. It's also silly to me, and that's fine. It's entertaining, but it can be frustrating because it's very similar to I can't remember which one, but we said it simultaneously gives us too much and then not enough.
Yeah. Well, and it's like there's some Fae tropes of like the bargains that like you have to be crafty and intentional about how you word them because like the magic does like hold you to what you agree to, but like what you agree to is not always necessarily as it seems. So I think it's interesting that they are like simultaneously all powerful, but also beholden to this other sense of power.
Yes.
That is undescribed.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that I think Mass does really well in this book. She sets up contrast beautifully. And I think that is one of the driving mechanics through which she builds this world. And so we open the book with human, right? We're grounded in humanity, in hunger, in pain, in struggle, in winter. And then we transition and get such a stark contrast to the spring court, which is gorgeous and beautiful and lush, and the air smells like lilacs, and there's food everywhere. And it's just so powerful, right? To note that contrast, to make both feel really true and really real. And that's kind of like Mac, right? Where Dublin becomes something unexpected. And it's not what she really sees or really comes to know. And it's similar to like Feyre learning this layered history and contrasting with what she thought she knew versus what really happened. Like as she's learning more about the war or learning more about the Fae in this world, her understanding of it and what she's been taught in history class, well, probably not class, in history lore, is very different. It contrasts everything and like changes her worldview.
Well, and I think it's interesting that like there's the adage of like history is written by the winner, but what she understands is, I mean, she's not necessarily the loser, because it doesn't. I would argue that there's not a winner in, at least between humans and Fae. Like there was an obvious victor in like whether the humans should be enslaved or not, but like there's not a real true victor, and yet like her history is written so negatively.
Yeah.
Even though there were Fae that fought on her side.
Yeah, which
like,
she didn't know.
She didn't know that.
Which is like mind-blowing to this girl, right? Who is 19, but
and can't read.
But oh, she's a great hunter. Also, sorry, I'm going to go off. I'm going to get a little bit on a high horse. You mean to tell me that this rich guy, her dad, right, merchant, whatever, gets involved with the mafia, it seems like. They come and break his leg. The wife dies. There's 3 young girls. He has no money, and not a single other human in this village is like, maybe we should help them. Not a single one. And all along, they're like, whoa, those Fae, they're really, really dangerous. The humans are leaving you out here to starve, y'all. Like, maybe they're not that bad. Anyway, stepping down from my high horse.
I mean, but it's important to note because, like, I think that often, like, we paint certain things or people or whatever as villains or monsters, and like we do that to hide our own monstrosities. Like, oh, well, if we all blame the Fae, then I don't look as bad for whatever like sins I'm perpetrating.
Yeah, they become the scapegoat.
So
for all of the negative feelings.
Yeah.
Or fear that you may have. Another moment of contrast that we get that I think is done exceptionally well is comparing the spring court to Under the Mountain. And we see the entire series through Feyre's eyes. Ish.
Definitely this
Feyre's
book.
telling.
Yes.
Sometimes through someone else's eyes.
Oh, very, very true.
The contrast of Under the Mountain compared to the spring court, right? And so it is very clear 3 parts to me. And I like that contrast. And maybe that says something more about me and like what I'm looking for in books, but the stakes were higher. The emotional weight was higher, right? There was something scarier and devious and like evil, where I was like, yes, like give me more of that. But that contrast, right? Like we couldn't have Under the Mountain if we didn't have the beauty and the lushness of the spring court. Because to go from like the human world straight to Under the Mountain, it's like, oh, like everything sucks. Like we needed the lightness in between, which I think is something that Moss did really well.
And I think also if you compare just in general Prythian to the human world, like the human world is very muted and drab. And not just because it's winter, but because it feels like it's lacking a level of life and like magic. But then like even when you go, so then you go from there to the spring court and it's vibrant and lush, but it's like vibrant in like a pastel, like
spring
way. But then you still get that vibrance Under the Mountain, but it's like jewel toned, it's blood red, it's blacks, but there's a vibrancy that is like clearly delineating Fae from human world.
And some of those descriptions, right, between all 3 of these buckets of world, right, really lean on those sensory descriptions. We get to feel cold. We understand and hear the crunching of the snow underneath Feyre's feet. Like we feel hungry, and we then move and we get into the spring court where everything feels, sounds, tastes, looks so different, all because we've got these long expositions that include a lot of sensory description. It's really rich in that way. And there's so much of it.
Well, and like it is a lot. But I think that it is meant to put you in like again in Feyre's mindset. Like she wants to be a painter. She wants to be an artist. She looks at the world in that way. And so Mass does really put you in that artistic mindset. I mean, we both are crafty, artsy people. Like there are times when you look at those things, and I think it's a little overdone in this first book.
Yeah.
And like honestly, even in some of the other ones, but I will say that it is a very intentional thing. How effective it is or how overdone it is another thing. But
what I didn't love, and I think I texted you during my reading of this book, was yes, like we are seeing the world through Feyre's like artistic, painterly way. But my God, how many times did I need to read, I could never paint it. I could never. We get it. You suck at it. You suck at painting. You can't read. You can't paint. You can't think very well because you get handed the most simple riddle and you're like, I don't know. I'm going to go do these trials instead. I could have benefited from some editing in that way. I get it. It's so overwhelmingly beautiful and rich in detail and color and light and shadow that Feyre recognizes that she is not equipped to paint it. However, I wish I had a tally of how many times there is a phrase like, I could never paint it. I could try, but I could never.
Make it a drinking game.
You really could. You really could. And I want to transition a little bit into the characters, right? So we've talked quite a bit about the world building and the way that we do, or the way that Mass does that throughout the book. Long exposition, use of contrast, loose magic system, but we have some structure upon which our characters hang. So first we have Feyre. And I think everybody can tell my feelings about Feyre thus far. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. She went from being like, oh my God, she's Katniss, and I'm excited to, oh my God, this girl sucks. She's 19. She's an idiot. She's never been in love. And here she is. She's like, but I love him. And we're like, girl, what? What? This guy? You okay. Okay. She breaks literally every rule that she's been given in a highly dangerous world that she has been pulled into. And they're like, hey, like, please don't go outside, especially during this really odd ceremony for magic making reasons, because it's not safe. And know what she does? She goes.
Yep.
She goes. But I will say, and I highlighted this quite a few times throughout the book, is Feyre is principled, right? She has empathy, and that empathy continues to grow throughout her experience in Prythian. Especially like the scene where the summer court fairy comes to the house with his wings ripped off, and she is there to like guide him into death, was really powerful for me and showed me like, oh, if there's more to Feyre than just superficialness. And then even through to the last trial, like it haunts her to have to do what she has to do. She is principled in that way. And you see that again in the second book pretty early on with the tithe, but that makes Feyre a whole character to me.
And I think that it's like, you know, we referenced she's 19, you know, and like I remember being 19 and I remember having very strong opinions on things. And it is hard to overcome a lifetime of like taught understanding or like opinions about the world. And the whole point of why she gets pulled to Prythian is she killed with hate in her heart. She killed the fairy knowing that it was probably a fairy and doing it anyway, even though she wasn't attacked. And the fact that she is able, not just because she loves Tamlin, but because she's friends with Lucian and because she's friends with Alice, like she starts to understand that, okay, I've been told things that aren't true or are at least hyperbolic. And so like, I'm going to adjust my opinion and I'm going to treat you the way that I would treat a human, which is I'm going to give you like that empathy and that compassion. And like, she wants the world to be better and she actively does that. So again, I don't like, yeah, Daddy, I love him. Like, but also like deep down, there's goodness. And I think that that's important.
Agree. And then we have Tamlin, who there are attempts in this book to, I don't want to say like humanize because he's not a human, but like to make him a well-rounded character with complications, right? We get some of his backstory and how he was the most powerful, but he didn't really want to be in a position of power. He never wanted to be the High Lord, and it was kind of thrust upon him and all of that responsibility. And whether or not his feelings are true is beside the point, because to Feyre they are. He falls in love with Feyre, protects her, kind of goes through hell to make sure that, you know, she can be safe, she can be maintained. But man, I really just did not like him at all. And maybe that's because I'm a woman of a certain age. And I'm like, ooh, this guy, there's a lot of red flags that you're not seeing, honey.
Well, and to your point, we see or we understand everything from Feyre's perspective. And she is told many times, truly listen, like your senses will try to confuse you. And so how much of what she sees is just what she wants to see and wants to believe, which I can't fault her to an extent in that, like, you spend, 8 to 10 years of your life taking care of your family and of people who should be taking care of you. And then all of a sudden you're given this reprieve.
You don't know what to do with yourself.
You don't know what to do with yourself. Yeah. And it's kind of a Stockholm syndrome type thing of like, You know, like
Belle falls in love with the beast.
Exactly. And once you get to Prythian, there are so many parallels of like, you know, because Lucian is arguably like a mixture of Cogsworth and Lumiere. And
the sweeping expanse of the library, even though she can't read.
Right. Like there are like that he is surly and like knows that she could break his curse, but doesn't really want to try. Yeah. Like, so it's like there are a lot of things there. But again, we see everything from her perspective, and how much does she miss or like disregard because she is a human in a Fey world where everything is meant to confuse. And she is recovering or like, you know, dealing with this loss of a role that she has had and that she didn't want. So.
Very true. We also get Lucian. And we love him.
We do.
Oh, we love him. Their banter is great.
Yeah.
He seems like a solid friend, not just to Feyre, but also to Tamlin. Like, he's a generally good dude. And understanding his backstory gave him more texture and weight that I thought was really important. He felt realer to me than Tamlin.
Agreed. And I wanted, from the get-go, the chemistry between Lucian and Feyre is so good. And like, I was like, I don't want you with Tamlin. I want you with him. I want you with Lucian so bad. But that being said, like, I do respect and really appreciate that they have such a solid friendship. Because like, I think that it's important to see that like you can have, even in a romantasy, you can have like males and females be really exceptional friends.
Yeah, agreed. We also have Rhysand, who from the minute he's introduced as the handsome stranger.
The most beautiful male she's ever seen.
From the jump, I'm like, yep, that guy, that's the guy. Like, that's the love interest, right? Which I think is revealed to us throughout the remainder of the series and not quite in book one. But their relationship is also really special between Rhys and Feyre. Not just like, okay, we get more about this High Lord of the Night Court, and he's really interesting, and he's really hot, and he's got wings, and oh my God, and like, how is he involved with the Amarantha thing? And but him coming to her under the mountain when she's in her cell, and she's certainly going to die from that fever, and he's like, I can fix you. I can save you. But we know that everything is a bargain. Everything is maybe not what it seems, but Feyre negotiates and agrees to spend 1 week every month in the Night Court for saving her life in that moment. And then she gets the tattoo, and that becomes a really interesting device throughout the remainder of the book for their relationship and their bond. And I think also hints at Rhys's true feelings for Feyre.
Well, and we see, like, you know, in Nettle, we talked about complicated feelings and complicated emotions. And I think, like, we see Rhys in a very complicated manner, because there's obviously this history of, like, him being kind of evil. But then all of a sudden he's helping Feyre. And yes, bargain aside, like, what does he get out of it? And that last time he comes to her cell, and he says, like, I just wanted to be real for a minute.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, what's going on here? Like, there's so many layers to we get a glimpse into the number of layers that are Rhysand.
Right. And again, poor women having to do the emotional labor for these dramatic men. Sure, come to me and tell me all of your drama while I'm starving and covered in worm poop.
And dying of a fever.
Sure. And then the last character I want to talk about is maybe my most favorite one in this book is Amarantha. I love her. She is evil. She is cunning. She is just petty Betty. And I thought that she was so fun as a character. You can tell that she is awful. right? She is an awful creature. And we get an understanding of why between her sister and Jurian and her kind of not being an emissary from Hybern, but like a test from Hybern. And then her just being so cruel, but also her dialogue is delivered so funny to me. Like, she calls Feyre a human worm, which I think is hilarious. And then at some point she says, like, take her away. I'm tired of her mundane face. Like, same girl. Me too. I'm tired of Feyre at this point. But I really like Amarantha. What I didn't love is that we killed the big bad right off the bat. We kill her pretty quickly, right? Is one book, one and done. It's not one and done, but it seems like we got to the final boss and we were able to kill her, and great, now it's all over. I would have liked to see more Amarantha throughout the series because I just like her.
That's fair. And I think it's, you said that she's just truly awful. And that's one of the interesting things about villains is often the villain is handling something the wrong way, but they have a generally positive like motive. And like sometimes it's been that motive's been twisted, but like they generally like they have a reason. Amarantha is just
petty.
Pardon my French, but she's a bitch.
Yeah.
Like she's terrible. There's no good reason.
Yeah.
Because while you could argue, well, the stuff with Jurian and with Clythea, like you could argue that those are what like set her off, but they're not. She was like that before all of that happened. Yeah. So like there's a beauty in like you are just bad to the bone. And again, like I kind of like it.
Yeah. It's the authenticity for me.
Yeah. And like it's funny that she's described as like beautiful, but also not.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that like, yes, she's attractive in that like all Fae have a level of beauty, but that she's not like an exceptional beauty.
Right.
So like.
She's not striking in the way that Feyre describes other high Fae.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which I think is interesting. And then to the point of her being like a test. And I think they talk about this more in like later books, but that like she kind of was a test but she was going off on her own and doing her own thing. And she was just allowed to do that for a set amount of time. But that basically that like they do Hybern a favor in getting rid of her like, because she was a liability for him.
She's crazy.
So,
but I really liked her.
I mean, I get it. Cause like, again, as a villain, like she's fantastic.
She's a good villain.
Yeah, petty is the right word.
Yeah.
Like, let me toy with you. She's like a cat playing with the mouse.
Completely. Even with the hanging of Claire's body.
Yeah.
Right? She's like, look what I did. Isn't that funny?
I had so much
horrific.
fun.
It's horrific. And then she even says something like, Claire had to go on and die on me. Like, I could do the same to you, Feyre, but that's not fun.
Yeah. I'm bored now.
I'm bored. So instead, I'm going to give you these 3 ridiculous trials and a riddle that is so easy, but you're dumb, so you can't solve it.
But speaking, okay, to that, Feyre makes bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And like, doesn't think things through until all of the sudden she is so smart.
She's brilliant.
She's brilliant. She put pieces together, all of these random mundane conversations that like she wasn't even a part of. And she's just so smart all of a sudden. And you see that like even in the next couple books, and like you could argue that moving forward, well, she's a Fae and their minds work on a higher level and whatever. But you're still a human and all of a sudden you're a genius?
And you can recall all of these conversations that you eavesdropped into?
That was a moment where I was like, as much as I'm reading this for vibes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up a good point. I'm going to step back onto my high horse. With you say in the later books, you know, because she is high Fae. Okay. Feyre dies, right? So she stabs Tamlin in the heart. Oh my God, his heart is made of stone. Spoiler. So he doesn't die. Amarantha gets pissed and she's like flinging her body all around. And Feyre feels and hears her neck snap, which I thought was written really well, actually. And then all 7 of the High Lords, with their Autobot Autospark, Allspark in their soul, drop a little glitter onto her. Here you go, baby girl. Yeah, here you go. Our darling, sweet, powerful Feyre, you've saved us. Now let us save you.
Now let's save. It's too late to save you. Let's resurrect you.
Let's resurrect you. And oh, by the way, you're going to turn into a Fey sorry. Maybe sorry? We're superior, so maybe you're welcome. But it bothered me so much. And I like the resurrection, fine, right? Cool, because this magic doesn't make any sense. They've had this all along, or did they only get this Allspark back once the curse was broken? Unclear. Unclear how much of their power was limited by this curse.
Right.
But what I don't love is that by bestowing upon Feyre this glitter, I don't know what else to call it, because I think that's what they call it, or this light, this spark of life.
Yeah.
You turn her Fey without consent. You change from a mortal being into an immortal being, and she has no say in the matter. And I don't love playing with consent in that way.
That's fair. And I think when we talked about this originally, I do think that it does seem to me, even in this book, she wanted to live. I'm sure she didn't know.
Life, sure.
Life. Yeah, I'm sure she did not know that the transformation would happen. However, I do think that the resurrection was welcome. Like, there was obviously, she was clinging on, and we discuss more later, like the intensity with which she clinged on to, but like she was waiting in that limbo period, and she chose to go back to her body when they healed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the turning high fae, and she struggles with that, like, off a lot, even in this book, and then very much in the next book, of like not belonging and not like still wanting to relate to humans, but knowing that she can't go back.
Yeah.
Like, she can't invite her sisters to her wedding.
It's another point of contrast, right? Where she is still having to work on language. But I think Rhys even points it out at the end of this book. Like, you have an immortal body with a human heart, and like hang on to that human heart. But that is such contrast that she has to reconcile now. And
it's such a responsibility that she didn't ask for.
Nope.
Like, she is now both worlds and yet neither world. And how hard that must be. And again, something she didn't ask for. I think ultimately she does embrace it, but how much of that is because she has to?
Yeah.
So
I don't know. It also makes me think of this Allspark moment of what we talked about earlier in this book, of one of the Fae tropes of like, bargains happen, but they may not have the results that you want. And so while Feyre did choose life, right, she pulled her spirit back into this body now that she was given the glitter by the High Lords. That itself was a bargain. We can resurrect you. Here's the consequence. But hey, you get to live.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
But it's just another, like you said, it's a bargain. It's another bargain that she made when she was told not to.
Yep.
And that she didn't think through the consequences of.
Well, she didn't. I mean, could she think? Who knows?
That's fair. That's fair. In that one, she couldn't.
My girl's neck was sideways. I don't think much is going on up there.
That's fair. And
throughout this book, not much is going on up there.
Except when she's about to stab.
Except when it counted.
When she's about to stab Tamlin.
Yeah. So we've had quite a lengthy chat between the world building mechanics, what worked, what didn't work for us. I touched a little bit on this silly but useful magic system, highlighted moments of contrast, picked up on like, yes, these are traditional Fae tropes, but here is how they're used in ACOTAR. Deep dived on our characters, for better or for worse. should we get to portal moments?
I think it's time.
Nice. All right. So at the end of each episode, we talk about our peak portal moment. This is the moment in the book where we felt the most immersed, where the world felt biggest and the realest and most texture, the best, and where it took up the most space. So I'm curious, where did you feel that?
So I always love getting to the summer solstice scene because she drinks the fairy wine and she starts dancing and she talks about how she's so connected to the earth, that she belongs to the earth, and just the weight that is like lifted in that scene.
Yeah.
And like it feels very much like Mother Earth is like embracing her, and like you can see like these fire spirits and like I mean obviously like she doesn't describe it so much in that way, but like that's what I see is like just all of these elemental spirits or entities are like there and like dancing with her, and she's so connected in that moment and so free and untethered. And I remember spending summers by bonfires and like just there is like a level of freedom when it's dark and then you have this firelight and everything changes.
And you're drunk.
And you're drunk. But it's just like it is so beautiful, and it is like I would say it's the peak moment of like relaxation and like that is the beginning of the end. When you think about like in terms of tension and aggression, like before and leading into Under the Mountain. And I just love, like, I feel that scene so much and I love it a lot.
Yeah, it's where Feyre herself is the most immersed in the world.
Agreed.
For me, it is the capturing of the Suriel. Love. Probably because it's like the first like spark of real action we get after we cross the wall. But the description of the old forest and how nobody's walked here in 500 years, and the way the branches and the trees are braided together to make this really dense, spooky place. I was like, put me right there. Love it. I love an old forest, especially when it's misty and covered in moss. And oh my gosh, there's dangers lurking around the corner. And how she sets this trap for the Suriel and catches the Suriel. And even the description of the Suriel. Right? Like the color or lack thereof in their eyes, and the slits for the nose, and the length of their teeth, and the black gums. And I think there's a line that says like, skin has fallen off or has been forgotten. And I was like, I loved that haunting description of this being that Feyre is smart enough to catch. Sure. However,
we'll lean into the huntress aspect on that.
We will. Early on, we'll do that. And then that moment turns so dangerous when the Naga appear and there's stakes and threat and action that's happening. And the description of the Naga is these serpentine things, and they just come out of the woods and chase. But in that moment too, Feyre is grounded in her principles, right? She could just hightail it out of there and leave the Suriel trapped, but she frees the Suriel so the Suriel has a chance to escape as well. And I think that's what really pulled me into that moment. Not just the descriptions of this forest and not just the descriptions of the Suriel, but Feyre herself being who she is and us understanding her heart and her abilities.
And it's an interesting, again, it's a moment of contrast in my opinion, because we have slogged through so much in action, and then we get a lot of very intense action very, very quickly. And normally for me that would feel very jarring, but it seems so natural. And as fast as it happens, it's still complete and it's still full, and there's like intention behind it, which again, I've used that word a lot, and I do think that Mass is very good. How, whether for better or worse, the intentionality with which she writes things. And so like there is a completion to that, and it's not as jarring because I still feel like it's real.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is contrasting the beauty of the spring court which Feyre is describing, we hear Tamlin say, like, there's some things that are dangerous out there. And we're like, that's impossible. It's so
spring.
beautiful. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like, oh, these birds, like, cool. No, we get true violence, which I think is important.
Yeah.
And good contrast.
Agreed. You also kind of mentioned this. Obviously, we stand Amarantha and her
We do.
her villainous, but we talked about the vibrancy of the darkness under the mountain, but all of the descriptions of like the throne room.
Oh, the red marble floor, the way the chandeliers are casting like different whirls of light across this cavernous space. And then the way that Amarantha is seated in that throne and what she looks like, her hair braided through her crown. And oh, so good.
Yeah, and the vibrancy of her red dress.
Mhm.
And then to your point earlier, Claire, like the amount of description we get
Yeah.
of her mutilated body
Yeah.
is like
Alarming.
It is alarming.
Alarming. But I think that makes Under the Mountain feel big, right? It feels cavernous. It feels dangerous. In a way that was so valuable to me in my experience of reading this book. Because if it was just going to continue to happen in the prettiness of the spring court, it loses some of the immersive texture that can pull you really, really in. Even like through the trials, we get good descriptions and good immersion points and portal moments with the Middengard worm and like what that smells like. I felt, the second trial felt a little rushed and felt a little flat to me, but really played up temperature and like the heat that she's feeling and like the pressure of this cage of spikes coming down on her and on Lucien. And then the third trial had all of the emotional weight and the descriptions of what it felt like to have the warmth of that fairy's blood on her hand after she stabbed it in the heart.
Yeah. And I think the second trial, it felt like it was more of a like, we just want to push the fact that there's something more to Rhysand than what the rest of the court sees. And it was less about her and more about him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the not just the physical feeling of the blood, but also like the amount of guilt and the intensity which she describes the conflicting emotions she feels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is very heavy.
You're right there with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I felt guilty, which is not hard. I carry so much guilt on my own, but like it weighed on me.
Yeah. Good moments. Good moments all at the end.
Right there. Well, I think that's a wrap on this episode of Worlds Within, where story becomes space. Before we go, let's go ahead and give A Court of Thorns and Roses our immersion rating on a scale of 1 to 10 portals.
I am going to say 6 out of 10. I felt there were a lot of times throughout this book, I think I said early on that, yes, there was a lot of sensory description of these worlds and of these places in moments where I felt pulled in and I understood and where it became big, but it lacked a lot of action for me to keep me interested. The lore and the world building that happens in page after page after page of exposition where nothing else is happening lost me. Had that been told or shown to us in a different way, I might have given this a higher rating. However, saving everything for the latter third of the book was enough to keep me reading more. So I have started the second book to find out, where does Feyre's journey continue and what does that look like?
So if I look at like just this book, I have to go with, I'm going to do slightly higher. I'm going to go with 7 because you're right. Like it's a slog. It's, as you said, a 400-page prologue. And I feel that way about most of her first books. However, she does give you enough to go through later. And the juice is worth the squeeze when you think that like she comes back to descriptions and like lore and things that she drops now in every other book, like in every subsequent book. And sometimes it's not all, and it's often not all at once. Like there are things from book 1 that do not come back in until book 3 or 4. And you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that until just now. And so I think, again, it's the intentionality that does carry through the series. But yeah, like as a one-off, just reading this book, it's hard to get through.
Yeah.
So.
Oof. Well, ACOTAR gave us a world of contrast, from hunger and cold to decadence and warmth, beauty and cruelty, all bathed in pools of starlight or smeared across red marble floors. But whichever
makes you wonder why they're red.
It's easier to clean. Maybe not. We saw that with Feyre too. She couldn't clean that floor.
No.
But whichever court is your favorite, ACOTAR leaves us with one thing clear. Feyre's story is just beginning, and I'm still learning where it goes, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
But keeping in line with show and tell, I'm up next for our next episode, and we are trading Eternal Spring and Fey courts for blood-soaked arenas and high-stakes moonlit trials. Ooh, I can't wait for you to read The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent.
I'm excited because it looks very good from the synopsis, and I feel like we are pretty well matched in our tastes. But also I think it's interesting that we're moving from trials to trials. And I'm excited to see, well, I mean, honestly, that's been the last 3, or it'll be
We've had
3
a lot
in a row,
of trials.
because there were trials in the first one or the second one, and then trials now, trials coming up. So it'll be interesting to contrast the different types of trials that our heroines see. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on all of the socials. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Worlds Within, where story becomes space. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Worlds Within Pod for more episodes, sensory guides to your favorite books, and more.
And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Bye!